It was like the heartbeat of progressive politics, and there were huge anti-war, anti-Vietnam War demonstrations. Even people got killed there.
Right.
You know, so it was like you said, a worldwide anti-war movement. But here, you know, I talk to people like Brooklyn for Peace. I've had incredible opportunity to know Noam Chomsky, and I've talked to him about it. So initially, it was not really, the response was not really so anti-war, but slowly it built up.
Right, it slowly built up, but I must say that in a way that I don't know yet if it's exactly a parallel, but just as young people are really taking the lead today on the climate fight, the fight to save the planet, young people really kind of opened the doors to anti-war activism in the States, and I think in other countries too. Young people were really in the forefront of saying this war was bad, it had to stop immediately. Of course, my generation grew up in the literally in the aftermath of World War II, and we grew up, you know, being told and educated that that was the good war. But of course, you know, World War I was supposed to be the war to end all wars, and then we had the Second World War, and so we also grew up, especially those of us who were white, and my family was moving into the middle class as I was a youngster. We grew up with a certain kind of belief that we not only could, but we had an obligation to make the world better. And some of that was healthy and good. Some of it was a little arrogant, but it basically provided a kind of foundation and a belief that we could do this. And one place to start was by ending this war in Vietnam.
Now, you are wise enough and experienced enough to clearly see how the world is falling apart now. You know, and you know, like people like Trump here in America, and Modi in India, and Bolsonaro in Brazil. I mean, as if they just all had a meeting together and they're doing things exactly the same way. Racism, war, violence, anti-immigrant violence, and anti-immigrant rhetoric, you name it, violence against women, things like that, extreme conservatism, lying to people flat out, you know, so what do you see the difference between what you saw back in the 60s and what you see now?
Well, in terms of the global picture and what we're up against, one thing that's happened over the years, well, two things I want to mention in particular that's happened over the years, is that there has been a tremendous consolidation of power, especially economic power. But, you know, often with economic power comes political power, comes cultural power, and military power. So there's been a tremendous consolidation, much more so than, you know, 50 years ago. I don't have all the facts and figures in front of me, but fewer and fewer people and their families own more and more of the wealth of the world, not just this country, but, you know, many parts of the world. At the same time, and one other thing about that is that partly that has happened because certainly here in the U.S., the government policies, the federal government in particular, but other levels of government too, have been put into place to favor the rich people. So there are tax cuts.
As if they're working for the big corporations.
Exactly. And then you have in terms of international economic treaties and NAFTA and things like that, that also benefit the privately owned corporations. The move to privatization, all of it. So that means what we're up against is actually even stronger than what we were once up against. And at the same time, there are, I think, certainly in this country, let me just look at the last few years even, that when Trump, even before he got elected, when he was running for the presidency, it really kind of I don't think he meant to do this, but he kind of shined a light on just how deep the problems are in this country. So I think that a lot of the people who are active now understand, at least I certainly hope this is true, that a lot of people understand that it can't just be, our job can't just be putting Band-Aids on the problems.
Yeah.
We really have to go deep. Of course, the immediate job we face in this country is to get rid of Trump. And when I say Trump, I don't mean one person. I mean everything, all the players around him.
Right.
We have to get rid of all that. But that is far from enough. And I think more and more people, I hope more and more people are understanding.
Can we backtrack just a little bit? Because I was working with you back in 2003 when you were in charge of organizing this huge anti-war, anti-Iraq war demonstration, and in the middle of February, freezing cold.
Very cold.
we walked, like hundreds of thousands of people in New York walked together to protest this brutal, unjust war.
Right.
Now looking back, how did you really manage to rally so many people together? Just give us 2 minutes of your secret.
I mean, it was in the news. I mean, we were part of a global movement. So it was in the news that people in many parts of the world were saying no to this war. That many governments actually, this was before the U.S. War against Iraq had actually started. So we believed that with governments, several governments, many governments in the world saying no, people showing in mass demonstrations that they were opposed to it. And in fact, even public opinion polls in this country initially were opposed to it. We thought, well, maybe we could actually stop this war. And I think there was something about that notion, putting that out publicly, that allowed us it was 7 weeks of organizing that we did that. It was February 15th in 2003.
I remember we started off like in a remote corner of a church, and we had this NION, not in our name.
Right,
but
exactly.
15 people showed up.
Right.
And
it
slowly grew and grew and grew.
And I think some of that, the reason why I was able to grow so fast were two things. One is a hope, a very deep hope and belief that maybe we could actually stop a war before it started. And two, was that we knew how crazy this was, that it was just lie after lie. That there was really no justification.
And the media was a big part.
And the media was a part of it, and there was a whole lot that was in play, but people could see through that. And we knew there were no weapons of mass destruction that Iraq had at that point. And we knew that they were not a threat, quote, a threat to us. And they had nothing to do with 9/11. And, all the lies that were told. So I think the combination of seeing through the lies and that hope that we could stop a war before it started, because we all knew, I think many of us knew, many of us who had been involved in other anti-war activism over the years understood that it's much harder to stop a war once it's already going.
Okay, all right.